Before we begin, let me ask a simple question. How long can a community keep giving more and getting less? Because here in Indiana's Senate District 22, Tippecanoe County and its surrounding communities, we're watching families struggle while Indianapolis politicians pretend everything is fine. We've got overcrowded classrooms in Lafayette, crumbling infrastructure in our rural townships, rising childcare costs, stagnant wages, and a legislature more interested in culture war nonsense than actually helping the people who live here. District 22 is the home to Purdue's innovation, farmers who feed the state, firefighters who volunteer their time, and teachers who stretch every dollar to keep kids learning, and yet somehow treated like our needs are optional. Tonight, we're talking to someone who says District 22 deserves better, more support, more investment, and more actual representation. Someone who believes working families, not lobbyists, should be at the center of Indiana's policy making. Let's get into it. Today on the show, we're joined by Natasha Baker, a dedicated educator, proud Hoosier mom, and one of the Democratic challengers for Indiana's 22nd state Senate district. Born and raised in our great state, Natasha graduated from Harrison High School before earning her degree from Purdue University. She now lives in Tippecanoe County with her husband, a volunteer firefighter, and their two young children. As a family and consumer sciences teacher in the Carroll County Public Schools, she brings firsthand experience with everyday struggles facing Hoosier families, from affordable childcare and quality education to the rising cost of living. Driven by her passion for strong schools, healthy communities, and a more equitable Indiana, Natasha is stepping into the political arena to fight for working families and put people first. Please welcome Natasha Baker.
Hello,
Welcome to the
thank
show,
you.
Natasha.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It is always a pleasure. Let's get right into it. Families in Carroll and rural Tippecanoe counties often work multiple jobs just to keep up. Do you support efforts to establish a living wage in Indiana? And what specific policies would you introduce to help working families in your district afford basic needs like food, rent, and transportation?
Yes, of course, I support a living wage. I think that it is incredibly important that we shouldn't have to work, two or three jobs to make ends meet. Some of the policies that we could introduce are removing taxes on things like utilities. We can also make sure that the minimum wage obviously needs to be increased. I think that it's also important that our property values need to be assessed regularly and fairly. I think that it's also incredibly important that we are making sure that our taxes are fair. So we're moving the tax burden, to the higher earners in our state, not the lower earners, which will then help, the living wage problem. So, in terms of like houses, we need to make sure that people in the community are owning the houses. That would preventing equity firms from buying homes up in the community and then renting them out. Obviously, is a big problem, and Indiana had no rules or regulations on doing so. So that would kind of hopefully help the housing if we introduce those types of regulations, and then removing taxes on things like utilities would also be a step in the right direction.
Even in rural communities, housing prices and property taxes are rising faster than wages. What's your plan to make housing and daily life affordable for families in places like Delphi, Flora, and Camden?
So again, like kind of piggybacking off of my last answer, I think one of the biggest things that we need to do to make life more affordable is to prevent large corporations from coming in and making things more expensive. Data centers, Indiana is being targeted for data centers, which we know will make utilities go up without proper regulation. The people of Indiana, the people of Delphi and Flora and Lafayette should not be having to pay for these data centers. These corporations are going to make a lot of money, but it should not be at the expense of everyday people. So we need to regulate some of those types of corporations coming in. and overall just shifting the payment, the tax burden to those types of corporations, which then will save money to, save money for the everyday Hoosier.
Carroll County is effectively a child care desert. Northern Tippecanoe has a long wait list and high cost. As a mother yourself, how would you tackle the shortage of affordable, high quality childcare so working parents aren't forced to choose between a paycheck and parenting?
I think this is something I'm extremely passionate about. Indiana has currently paused all childcare vouchers until the end of 2027, which is so disheartening for so many families. Those already on the wait list will now not receive them. Some people that have vouchers are also not going to receive them. And I get a lot of questions and a lot of pushback when I talk about vouchers. And they say, well, many parents say, well, I pay for my child's childcare. Why am I having to help another family, pay for theirs? And I don't think that people realize I've talked to many people who their child care centers have now closed down because all of those people on vouchers or all the growth that they had expected, they're not going to see that growth anymore. So the child care centers are closing down. And I've also talked to parents who their childcare center actually raised money, $30 a week extra to cover the lack of income coming in from the vouchers. So I think number one, we need to change the conversation about childcare vouchers because people don't understand how that actually helped the entire system. And then from there, we need to expand vouchers. We need to ensure that families who need them actually receive them because everyone benefits from that too. We also forget that having parents in the workforce is a good thing. So for every money, for all the dollars we spend on things like vouchers or universal pre-K, we actually get money out of those programs because their parents can now participate in the workforce. They have money to contribute to the economy and things like rent and buying groceries and getting car loans and all of those types of things. So changing the conversation about, loans or sorry, vouchers. And then we also need to make sure that we have more we need to remove some of the barriers for people to open their own childcare centers. We obviously cannot compromise safety and oversight. So that might be, hiring more people to do those types of administrative tasks. But we absolutely need, I know in Tippecanoe County, I live in Battleground, so in between Battleground and Flora where I work, there are not a lot of options for childcare. I was extremely lucky to find one for my like I had a 6-month old, my husband, we had some really unexpected health issues come up and I absolutely needed childcare and I happened to find one spot, but I was so lucky and so we need to make sure that we have more centers opening up or make it attainable for home centers to open and that would, is definitely important. So more centers, expanding childcare vouchers would definitely help this childcare issue that we're facing in District 22.
Rural schools like Carroll, Delphi, Tri County, and Frontier face declining enrollment and strained budgets. What reforms would you push to ensure rural schools get the funding they need to provide competitive pay, safe buildings, and strong academic programs?
I think one of the most important things that we need to do to fix this issue or to help this issue and ensure that our rural schools especially can continue to thrive is we need to undo the funding cuts that were done by SB 1, the property tax reform where people received a $300 tax credit in the name of saving money, but really now local taxes are having to rise. We need to undo those the tax bill, the tax credits. SB 1 has been absolutely terrible for our local schools, and it will only continue to get worse. So we need to restore that funding. We can do that in a few ways. I think that it's people are rightfully very concerned about the rising property taxes, but we could shift. There's lots of options. We could shift to more of like a land value tax where we have bigger buildings or bigger, more high value land in like places like in downtown, pay more taxes compared to the average like homeowner, which would help offset some of that. I think we need to make sure that we have policies in place that focus on teacher pay, teacher retention, because without quality teachers, our schools are also going to continue to not continue. I think in spite of our schools are doing, well, but we want to We want them to continue to do well. I love the school that I teach at. I've been a teacher for 11 years, but we need to make sure that our schools are staffed with great teachers, that our students have everything they need in order to study. So they have dual credit opportunities, and all those types of things take money. So we need to make sure that they're funded using the proper tax methods, or changing up how we do taxes, increasing taxes on corporations, the data centers that are coming in and getting tax moratoriums. We need to focus on those types of revenue streams.
Many families in the district want to work, but childcare, transportation, and low wages get in the way. What legislation would you support to make it easier for parents, especially mothers, to stay in the workforce without sacrificing family stability?
There's two things here. I think number one, increasing the child care vouchers, like I already said, would be, you know, would be very important in a place like Carroll County, but unfortunately there are not enough centers. So again, we would need to increase the amount of centers. And then another one that is it's in the news right now with maternity leave and parental leave. Our governor Braun just said that he's introducing a program where state employees are going to get the chance to bring their newborns to work, and I think that that's a family first policy um, on the outside, but if you really unwrap it and you realize that that's a workplace first policy. So we need to actually have people allowed to take parental leave when they have children, so they're not forced to quit their job or go without pay. That is actually not good for the economy or the workforce at all. So introducing a parental leave policy, supporting moms by allowing them to breastfeed at work, and those types of parental protections as well would encourage moms to stay in the workforce, allow them to stay in the workforce, would just be a few.
District 22 has been losing young families to bigger cities with better childcare, education, and job opportunities. What's your plan to make District 22 a place where young families actually want to stay and raise their children?
So I feel like here, like I said, I'm a public school teacher and I have been, but I think that conservatives typically see schools as a liability and not an investment. Schools are actually an investment in your community, and they attract people to stay in the community. It's an incentive to not move away and to buy homes in the community and all of those types of things. So we need to make sure that we are putting money into our public schools. I think it may be the number one draw to a small community. People love the small communities in terms of, like, your neighbors, and it's really easy to get around, and those types of things. But when it actually comes down to education, I know many families who would rather their kids go to a big school. And I think that's because we don't see our public schools as an investment. We also don't see our public schools as a way that something that everything benefits from. People like to come at me and say, well, I don't have kids in public school. Why should I pay taxes for a public school? And it's people don't understand or think about, not that they don't understand. I don't think that they think about, well, your doctor probably went to a public school, or your nurse or your mechanic. We are preparing people for the workforce at a public school. So without quality public schools, we do not have people to take the jobs in our communities that we need. And we also aren't supporting people to have high income jobs, which ends up more people are in poverty, and you just continue this cycle. People in poverty, they it's unfortunate, and they do cost the government money in terms of SNAP and other social programs. So if we just educate them from the beginning and set them up for success, the everyone wins from that. The child wins from that, the government, economy, everything wins by investing in our public schools, getting people to stay in the community, and opening the conversation that public school is not just a personal something that benefit from on a personal level. It does benefit the community, and it goes from there.
Do you ever get the feeling that some people's view on education is an educated populace is harder to control?
That is such a hard thing to speak to. So I come from a very conservative family, and I'm definitely the oddball. And so I think on the more progressive side, it's kind of easy to say like that maybe the people at the very top. So I could say that, like the Heritage Foundation, and we could go deep into those rabbit holes, and we could say, and I could say, yes, I do think that that is what they believe. But they've also been very successful, I think, at training um, and I think, leftists or progressives tend to think that as well. But coming from my background, which is a conservative family, I teach at a very small town conservative school. I don't think that that's necessarily what like the average conservative thinks. I think the average conservative just thinks they're not thinking of it that way. They're just thinking, I want to have public school where I can like, I can pray if I want to. I hate to use that as an example, but they have the freedom to for those types of things, and they don't necessarily see it as like an ecosystem of how when your education is poor, you are easier to control, you're easier to manipulate, you are easier to just you don't ask questions, you just kind of take everything at face value. So I don't think the average conservative sees our education system that way, but I think that the people at the top calling the shots at this exact moment in time, I think they definitely see it that way. I just read an article recently about the Moms for Liberty founder. They don't ever have anything good to say, but the Moms for Liberty founder, she was asked how she feels about public education and and she works for the Heritage Foundation or is involved in somehow. So she's not just some random person, but her goal is she hopes to see zero people in the United States educated by public education. I think that is a scary fact, and that goes into that control because if we all have to pay for education, I don't think people understand then that that means they can choose who they educate. They can choose what religion to teach you. They can say, no, we don't want you because that you have this skin color, you have this religion, and they can choose. That's the whole point of public education, is so everyone gets something. There's no control. And so, yeah, I think at the top, they're trying to control.
Indiana ranks near the bottom nationally in teacher pay growth. What will you do to ensure teachers in rural and semi rural communities receive competitive salaries and have the resources needed to teach effectively?
Right now, I think one of the biggest tools that we have to ensure that teachers continue getting pay raises and competitive pay, especially in our small rural districts, is having strong teachers unions. Collective bargaining rights are extremely important. I know that that is how many schools are able to negotiate raises for their teachers. And without those unions, the pay would not be increasing at a rate at all. So I think that we need to protect teachers' unions. We need to understand that there's not necessarily a teacher shortage. We have a shortage of people who are willing to work for the money that is being willing to be paid to them. If teachers made more money, there wouldn't be a shortage. I think we just need to be really honest about that fact. There's no teacher shortage. There's plenty of people. I teach a education class at my school, and so many students, they want to be teachers. They love working with kids. I always wanted to be a teacher. Um, so I can relate to them. But they say like, I want to be a teacher, Mrs. Baker, but I want to make more money. So I'm going to go be a nurse, or I'm going to go do this. So the pay is definitely deterring people from this idea. But if the pay was more competitive, even to that of a nurse, I think that the teacher shortage would be less of a thing. I know it would be less of a thing. Um, so we need to, yeah, change. I think a lot of these, especially in small communities, is just changing the conversation. I know for me, this just literally happened. I had a conversation with a woman 2 days ago, and I was talking about how we need to fund public schools, and she got very defensive. She said, well, if I paid you, like if you worked more or you got paid more, would you be a better teacher? And it's like, that's not what I said. She said, I remember when teachers just used to work for the heart of it or something. She just worked for the heart of it. I don't even know how she phrased it, but I was like, my heart doesn't pay my bills. I guess if I ripped it out and sold it on the black market, I could make some money off of my heart, but I can't make money off of my heart in the classroom. That doesn't pay my mortgage. So getting people to understand that fact, and they think I don't think they understand how little teachers are making, because the teachers of 1970s, which is what this woman was calling, she was like, these teachers were the heroes of their community and they didn't care how much they got paid. They were making more than what we're making now because the pay is almost the same, but the cost of living and inflation is way higher than it was in 1970. So yes, that teacher was teaching for the heart of it or whatever, but they were still making more money than what we're making now. I don't think people understand that at all.
Families in the district often travel far for pediatric care, maternity services, or mental health support. How would you expand access to healthcare for children and young families who live outside the major population centers?
So it is important that we focus on. I feel there's some very big systemic issues that are about to kick in or about to happen. So the one big beautiful bill, as we all know, is not so beautiful, and it did cut a lot of money out of Medicaid. And without Medicaid, many of our rural hospitals are going to really start feeling the pinch and feeling the pressure here kind of in the next year or so. One of the most prominent hospitals in our community, for like the rural part of District 22, is a hospital in Logansport. And they have a really large percentage of their patients who receive Medicaid. So without those Medicaid benefits or a reduction in Medicaid benefits, that hospital is going to face a closure or it's going to have to face cutting some of its staff, which is a huge deal. So I think Indiana needs to work on protecting Medicaid. Protecting Medicaid will at least prevent some of these hospitals, our lack of hospitals that we already have, from going away. So unfortunately, in order to expand access, the first thing we need to do is preserve the access we already have. And then we also need to make sure that we are attracting healthcare professionals to our area. So again, we do that by, I sound like a broken record, but we need to have good public schools in our community. If we don't have a good public school, a doctor is not going to want to come there and open up a practice. So it's really strengthening the communities as a whole. It's preserving the healthcare we already have and then incentivizing doctors and nurses to open practices in small communities by offering different types of I know some communities will offer like loan forgiveness for nurses who enroll in like a rural community program or those types of things.
Indiana pushes workforce initiatives, but many programs don't reach rural communities or parents with young kids. How would you shape workforce development to support parents, including retraining options that align with childcare realities?
Okay, so I can kind of speak to this in two ways. One is sort of related to what the question was, but it's what popped into my head. So I am a CTE teacher, which is career and technical education. Indiana has just introduced a new diploma where we have three different enrollment or three different seals. So we're getting rid of that like core 40 idea and the diplomas of, I don't know, even when I was in high school, we've switched it a lot since then. But in the past 4 years, we've had like three new diplomas. The newest diploma offers three different types. So you can get an enrollment seal, an enlistment seal, and an employment seal. So the employment seal right here, I feel like is related to this question because what it and it, especially rural communities. So this is Indiana's way of starting this workforce development and workforce training in high school and making sure that students are ready to enter the workforce. Not everyone's going to college, which is totally fine. It's not everyone's route. So we need to make sure that students are ready for the workforce. So Indiana has this new diploma. And again, I think it sounds really nice on the outside, but when you really dig into it for rural communities, it's going to be extremely difficult. They have to have so many hours of work-based learning. And if in Florida, where I work, there are very few workplaces to take all of these juniors and seniors who are going to need to go out into the workforce and get these work-based learning hours. So I think that is definitely an Indianapolis policy that they did not see how it was going to play out in a smaller community. So we need to make sure that the people in the state house understand that rural communities have a different infrastructure when it comes to workplace development. There are not as many buildings to house trainings in and as many workplaces that can allow people to come in and do internships or any kinds of training at all, apprenticeships and kind of understanding how rural communities work. And then we also need to understand, I know like kind of in Lafayette, we have a lot of adult education resources, but a lot of them do are in the evening. So people like to get on. I feel like with this whole SNAP reduction that we had, in October, the ugly colors of some people showed, and they were very much like, well, you should just get a better job. Well, it's not that easy if the training for that job is happening in the evenings and you don't have childcare for the evening, or you work during the day so you can't attend the class. So we need to couple workplace development or trainings with a childcare option. Those should always kind of go hand in hand. We need to have more grace when it comes to speaking to people about getting training for a job, and understand it's not that simple. Like, just finding a new job is such bad advice.
Too many rural Hoosiers feel ignored by Indianapolis lawmakers once the campaign ends. How will you stay accessible and accountable to families across Carroll and Tippecanoe, not just in the election years, but every year you serve?
I feel like it is extremely, children are extremely important to me, teaching, education. So I know that I would, continue to stay involved in those types of things. My children as well, they attend public school in District 22. So I am going to be involved in the school systems, and I know the struggles of everyday families. I don't think that I'm not like any other elected official that represents me. They are all old, or I should say older, men of a specific race, of a specific religion. There's not a lot of diversity here. So I think it's really easy for them to get elected and forget about the struggles of everyday families, because they are not an everyday family. They are older, they don't have children at home, they don't have children in schools. They are making money off of, whatever they're doing down in Indianapolis. And I am not like that. I have a family here. I have children in public school here, and I'm just an average working mom, a teacher. So I know the struggles, and they're not something that you I can just forget, because I'm living them. I'm living the same life and walking the same, path and struggle as everybody else.
All right, Natasha, you handled the policy talk, the district issues, and the serious questions like a champ. But now it's time for the segment that separates the candidates from the contenders. The beloved, feared, and occasionally unhinged, hold 'em or fold 'em. Rapid fire questions, no filibusters, no committee hearings, just your guts, your instincts, and your best poker face. Let's see what you hold on to and what you fold faster than the Indiana General Assembly folds on supporting public schools. Indiana should invest state dollars into universal pre-K access for every family in District 22.
Hold them.
Strengthening tenant protections so landlords can't raise rents or evict people without cause.
Hold them.
Indiana should adopt an independent redistricting commission.
Hold
No
them.
lawmakers drawing their own maps.
Obviously, yes, hold them to that one. Very passionate about that one.
Expanding maternity care access, including in rural areas where hospitals have shut down services.
Hold them.
Allowing teachers to negotiate for better pay and classroom conditions through expanded collective bargaining.
Hold them.
Purdue Pete should be allowed to run for lieutenant governor, but only if he promises to stop looking like he hasn't slept since 1978.
Hold them.
If elected, you must confront the greatest crisis in District 22, the goose gangs that patrol Purdue's campus like they own the place. Are we negotiating with them or declaring war?
Negotiate always.
IU is clearly the superior institution, and Purdue should admit it, especially since even their squirrels act like they're one exam away from snapping. Should Hoosier Nation require a formal apology from West Lafayette before letting them claim prestige again?
Definitely not. Fold them, boiler up to that question.
The legislature should be required by law to actually read the bills they vote on. Yes, all of them.
Hold them.
Natasha, thank you so much for joining us today. Your passion for District 22, your commitment to public education, and your dedication to Hoosier families shine through in everything you do. It's clear that you're stepping into this race not for the title, but for the people who call this district home. We appreciate your time, your candor, and your willingness to dive into the tough questions. even the unhinged ones. You're always welcome back on the show, and we'll be watching your campaign with interest as you continue fighting for a better, fairer Indiana. Folks, conversations like this remind us what real public service looks like. People stepping up because they care about their communities, not because they're chasing power or protecting special interests. District 22 deserves leadership that listens, that shows up, and that doesn't shy away from the hard work of making life better for working families. If today's interview resonated with you, dig deeper, learn more, and stay engaged. That's how we build the Indiana we all deserve. One informed voter, one honest conversation, and one act of accountability at a time. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.